I have my special guest here, Bill Whitmire. Bill Whitmire, as you are well aware, if you've been listening to the show or the station earlier this morning, is the host of the Bleacher Radio. And Bill, thank you for coming on to the show. Why don't you say hi to everybody? And also, you're the Republican chairman
For Milam County.
for Milam County. And tell people exactly what that is, along with what you're doing on the radio show.
Well, the Republican chairman and my Democrat counterpart, we kind of lead the party for the county. You're the one that's in charge of the candidates, making sure the candidates are all correctly registered and make sure they apply for office the correct way. And then you essentially run the primary and then help the county clerk run the general election so that
That's
everything's
a big responsibility,
done.
man.
It can be. I mean, it can be. You got to watch what you're doing and make sure you meet deadlines. I actually missed a deadline one time, and we had to take the case all the way to the Third Court of Appeals to get the candidate back on the ballot because I missed the deadline to put his name on the ballot.
Who was it in Florida? I think they missed the deadline, and everybody was upset because they were still counting votes, and because they forgot to get it under a deadline, they couldn't even use any of those votes.
That was over in the, I believe, West Palm Beach County.
Yeah, that's it. I forget what it was
Director
for.
of Elections. So it's happened several times with her, as a matter of fact. And after this last election in November, she actually decided to retire.
Decided to retire instead of getting fired.
Right. And I think she was the chief deputy during the 2000 election when they had so much trouble during the Bush v. Gore election.
Is it like not seen, or is it conveniently forgotten? That's the question.
I think a little bit of both, It's kind of like being an offensive lineman. Nobody really knows you did anything wrong until you get a penalty on you. So,
Bring it in, man. Bring in that Bleacher Radio. Okay. I saw some editorials, and they were from Mark Thiessen from the Washington Post. And you had a little blurb on that. Do you want to mention who that is?
he was actually he actually has been at times worked for various conservative candidates. He was Rumsfeld's speechwriter, Department of Defense, Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, speechwriter from 01 to 06. Then he helped President Bush during the 04 election, and then went to work for him after Rumsfeld left the DOD, and was a speechwriter for George W. Bush until 09. And then he went to work for the Washington Post, and he's a columnist there.
Okay, I didn't know any of this when it came to him. I was looking at Washington Post. I'm assuming it's a liberal newspaper, and usually liberal papers want to trash Trump, the whole works. And I'm not here to praise Trump or take Trump down on this particular show. I just want to talk about Trump, and let me tell you why. I'm an American. You cut me, I bleed red, white, and blue. And here's why. Nothing matters to me with this country other than the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And here's why. With those two pillars in place and protected, it will allow everybody to do what they feel they want to do within the realms of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. My problem is when you start chipping away at the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, you start altering what this country was all about. So if we maintain the Constitution and Bill of Rights, and you want to do some type of social program or whatever, and it gets voted, and I said, that's fine. As long as it's within the parameters of the Constitution and Bill of Rights, that's cool. So when it comes to President Trump now, I look at President Trump, and let me tell you something. I'm from New York. I've lived in New York all my young life. I know Trump from when I was growing up. I've seen him on the news. I've watched his interviews with Oprah, the whole works. He's been consistent in his thought process. Now, he's a businessman, and he's going to make contributions to Democrats and Republicans because he wants to build buildings, okay? But when it comes to being American, he loves this country, and I believe he's doing what he can, and he's trying to get done his promises when he was getting elected as president, and he's chipping them off one by one. So when I saw these editorials, the one I saw here, and which one was first?
That one
must have been here.
Yeah.
Keeping promises. Basically, he gave a list of the things that Trump promised he would do if gotten elected, and then Mark Thiessen wrote down, okay, he got it done. And then on the January 2nd, he wrote his, Mark Thiessen once again wrote Trump's top 10 list for this last year. And then on the 4th of this year, he wrote Trump's bottom 10. And on some of them, I agree. And on the top 10s, I totally agree. On the bottom 10s, I agree with some, but I say to myself, it doesn't really matter. And I'll explain why as we discuss it. So, Bill, with that setup,
Yeah.
let's talk about this. I like Trump because he's accomplishing the job, and in my opinion, he's accomplishing the job to keep this country intact and protected. Do you want to go anywhere with this initially, and then we can start talking about these 10 lists?
I think he's taken a stand that a lot of other presidents haven't. They've said things that we're going to do this, we're going to do that. If you do this, we're going to do this. And regardless of whether they're Republican or Democrat, a lot of people like to talk about Obama and his line that he drew in in Syria and didn't go to bat after the chemical weapons. Trump did that, but he also went to bat over North Korea. He's contrary to what people think, he has stood up at times to Putin. He's also kind of had some embarrassing moments with Putin, especially in Helsinki. Helsinki's one that comes to mind.
Right.
But he's made the decisions. Somebody said once a long time ago, the decisions aren't hard. It's following through with them that's hard. And he's taking those easy decisions and he's following through. He's doing the hard part. He's following through with it. And some of it's been fairly painless and some of it's a little difficult at times.
The most freshest thing would be the wall. He's like,
yeah,
I'm standing firm. I'll take the mantle on shutting down the government. That's how strongly I believe in the security of this country. I made the promise I'm going to do it. I'm not going to back down. I'm going to do what it takes. That'd be a perfect example of what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, he's not been able to accomplish a couple of his promises. One was completely eradicating Obamacare, but the legislature stood in his way on that one. He couldn't, he can't. The things that he's been able to do via presidential order, he's done. The things that he has to go through the legislature with, a lot of them he has done. And some of them he has not been able to. One that comes to mind is an opportunity program for inner cities, and it doesn't get any kind of recognition. But that was a bipartisan bill that passed both houses, and he signed into action, and it didn't get done. It was promised, and it didn't get done during the Obama administration, and it was promised and didn't get done during the W. Bush administration. But in just 2 years, Trump has managed to get that pushed through, and that was a bipartisan bill. I mean, I think it passed both houses by like 80%, and that has helped. It really has helped us. People don't think about it, but it has helped us. We have the lowest African American unemployment rate that this country has ever had. Ever. And a lot of it people credit with the opportunity initiatives that were taken to help strengthen the inner city.
And I forget what the meeting was. He was with a bunch of the black leaders, and they were saying, we haven't had a president who's done more for the black community since Donald Trump. And let me tell you why I'm saying all this. It's because, now look, you've been in the military.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had a person in charge of you that you thought was a total jerk,
yeah,
but he got the job done? You may not like him. You may not like his personality. He may be brash, but you have to respect this guy. He's getting the mission accomplished. Okay.
There were probably some people that thought that about me at various times. So,
I'm sure everybody thinks about that about everybody. Okay. I know you could probably use my name with a capital D. Okay. figure it out. But I'm like, look, I'm mission oriented. I know I'm going to leave some dead bodies. I try to leave as few dead bodies as possible. But it's mission first. We'll get the mission accomplished first. And in my opinion, this country comes first before attitude.
Yeah. You're exactly right. You look at things. He came in with the whole going to drain the swamp. He hasn't quite drained the swamp, but he's pulled the plug, and slowly started draining it and made things happen. Where he needed bipartisan support, he's gone out and gotten it. Where he didn't need it and he can do what needed to be done, he's gone and done it. And he's done it in a way that he's exposed some Republicans. He's also shielded some Republicans at the same time. But where he's needed bipartisan support, he's gotten it. We just talked about the opportunity initiatives, and there were several others that were in there. There was a chemical or criminal justice reform bill that he got passed through with strong bipartisan support. Sex trafficking. Obama talked about that for 8 years, accomplished nothing on the sex trafficking legislation, and within the first 2 years, Trump gets it done. I think it was ridiculous. It was like 96%. It's the first time that both houses, when it wasn't a judicial or political appointment, where they both agreed that heavily on something. And it was serious law that needed to be enacted, but was stymied the entire Obama administration.
Now, look, I'm not naive either. I bet you Trump's at these meetings and he goes, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to get. What does it take for you to do it? Let me see if I can do it. So these people say, look, I want this, I want that, I want this. He goes, and he puts it on a scale. He goes, you want that so I can get this? And I look at it and it's okay because it doesn't harm the country. It's a little thing you need, a little sugar. I bet you he's doing that. He's a businessman. He's making all these deals. But his general concept is this country needs borders. It needs to thrive. It needs to be secure. So, look, time's a ticking away. Let me do this. I got 3 editorials here. I'm going to scrap the first one because it's going to overlap on the second one. Okay, so we're going to get rid of that one. But what we got here, and this is compliments of the Temple Daily Telegram. But I got 2 editorials, the top 10 and the bottom 10. Okay, if you want, why don't you go over the top 10? We'll talk about the top 10s, and then we'll go over the bottom 10s, and we'll discuss it. Because I was telling everybody here in the station, I'm not going to talk on the radio like Trump's the next coming. Okay. I want to talk, I think he's doing a great job, and he does some things that are awkward and bad, but as you'll see in the bottom 10, there's going to be a difference on how you look on how those bad things are. So let's start with the top 10 first.
Okay, the top 10, the 10th one was he secured releases of prisoners that have been languishing, say, for instance, in Iran. Several pastors that were sitting in jail. He's gotten the release of 19 of those that weren't able to be done before.
And I relate that to President Reagan. When Carter was there and we had our hostages, and Reagan goes, look, when I get in office, you better release those people because I'm not playing around. Trump did the same thing. Look, I'm the boss now. Here's how it's going to work. And they go, he means what he says.
And even Reagan said at the time, Carter worked hard, but he had never come in with an iron hand and said, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. And Reagan came in from day one and said, you're going to release them or we're going to make you release them. And they did.
If you're in sales, you're going to relate to what I'm about to say. You can talk to somebody all day long, but if they don't sign that dotted line, you didn't make a sale.
Yep.
There's some people who can talk the sale, and there's some people who make the sale.
Okay, so the Forgotten Americans that everybody talked about, the manufacturing industry, and they're calling it the Trump boom. It's the first time in 23 years we've seen a manufacturing increase in the United States where we have now, and the Americans without a high school diploma reached the lowest point ever here in the last few years. And Wall Street said that wages have risen by 3.1%. So,
and he was getting jobs coming in before he was even president.
They said if we'd have stayed on the same pace that we were on before, we would have had a glut of about 10% of skilled workers in this country. And now they're saying at the pace we're on right now, it's only going to be 3.1. And that's with an increased number of manufacturing jobs being brought back to the U.S. So he's helped on the education side and on the manufacturing job side. I worked with Democrats and Republicans, as we talked about, on sex trafficking jobs, the right to try new drugs, to try new medical procedures. That had been stymied by both parties for a long time.
And I don't know why. Why would they do that if somebody's going to die? Why can't you try?
Big pharma, big pharmaceuticals, and the AMA. I mean, the AMA was completely against Trump for various reasons, and that was one of them because he promised to allow those types of treatments, organic treatments, non-medical treatments, and stuff like that had been stopped before. He ushered in what they call the golden age in the CIA, but he's appointed a female as the director. Gina Haspel is the director of the CIA, and Elizabeth Kimber as the first woman to lead the clandestine operations. And anybody that's been in special warfare or any kind of intelligence, that's a huge deal because that's always been thought of as as a man's club. In expanded domestic energy production, this is the first time America has ever been.
Comment on that too. Hold on, about the woman. I don't care who you are, and I've said this before. I work with certain people that are women, and I go, at a drop of a hat, I will follow you because you are a true leader. Okay, I don't care who you are, white, black, Chinese, woman, man. I don't care. If you know what you're doing and can get the job done and can treat your people right, I'll follow you wherever. Go ahead.
It's a great point. He pushed to expand domestic energy production, and we are for the first time an exporter country in the world in oil and gas, right? And as somebody that works in the oil field as my actual job, it has made things so much easier to actually get the job done based on the restrictions that were put on us by the EPA and other organizations in the government. In the 6 months after the Singapore summit with North Korea really has not done anything that they said they were going to do, and rather than keep the status quo as President Bush and President Obama did, President Trump has hammered down, put more sanctions on Pyongyang, trying to get Kim to come to the table again and actually do what he said he was going to do. He said he would dismantle his nuclear program, hasn't done it. Said he would dismantle his rocket program, hasn't done it. So Trump has put more restrictions.
Playing the game, seeing if Trump will be just like those others.
Well, remember during the Clinton administration, they signed a treaty, and Kim Jong-il said he would never produce any nuclear weapons, and here we are 20 years later, and everybody talks about how great a deal that was, and it didn't do anything. And Trump has said, I'm not going to fall into that hole. We'll just keep putting sanctions on you till you can't breathe, and that's where they are.
And China's pretty much backing them up too. I mean, China takes care of North Korea.
Well, they don't want. I mean, Kim Jong-il is he's a whack job. I mean, just there's no other way to put it. That guy's just whack job. I mean, killed his brother. He's killed everybody. Killed his uncle. I mean, he's just crazy. So. Then number 4, you got Syria and where the red line was on chemical warfare that Obama allowed the Syrians to jump over many times. They used chemical warfare twice, and both times Trump hammered them, and I mean hammered them hard. Even hammered their version of our Pentagon. It's leveled now.
Now, my brother Mark and I talked, what was it, last week about Syria, the withdrawal from Syria. I think we're going to hit on the bottom 10 here.
Yeah.
But did a fantastic job in Syria, but pulling out, I've got pros and cons. I want the boys and gals home because I don't want them in a meat grinder, but I also understand to keep us secure, there might be certain things that need to be done. So that's a debatable item.
Well, that's on you. The bottom 10. We'll talk because there's some things I don't throw in there too. He continued a tough line on Moscow, and then the negative side of that is on the lower 10 list. But he withdrew from the Immediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which a lot of people have hammered him on, but that's really an unenforceable treaty, especially with the weapons that China, India, Pakistan, even Afghanistan now that these countries have. That doesn't even help us at all. As a matter of fact, it hinders us in our defense against those countries. Shipped Javelin missiles to the Ukraine to help. Obama didn't really do anything to help Ukraine in their stance against Russia, and Trump has said, okay, we're going to help you out. And force the Russians to deal with you on better terms. He pulled out of the Iranian deal that John Kerry and Barack Obama had set up, which was a completely unenforceable, useless agreement.
That's 3 radio shows right there.
Yeah, I mean, and they have looked it over. But I think one of the best things that he did was, personally for me, was said when he came into office, he said, I'm going to appoint Scalia-like justices to the Supreme Court, and he's done that twice now, and strengthened the Supreme Court from a conservative standpoint to where now John Roberts is that swing vote. He's that Anthony Kennedy vote, and for a while we had 2 of them because you didn't know where Roberts was going to end up. Now you've got 4 extremely strong conservatives, 4 liberals, 1 that might be a little all over the place, and then Roberts is kind of in the middle, but I think he leans a little farther right than what Kennedy did. And so it has strengthened and made the Supreme Court a much stronger place.
That's an extremely important thing because it basically goes back to what I was talking about, the 2 pillars of this country. That's the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. If you can maintain judges in there who look at those as quote-unquote precious gems that we don't want to jack with, and you make your decisions based on that as compared to personal opinion or sordid gain agendas, that's a good thing.
I think one that's not on here that probably should be on here, you might have to make it 11, was renegotiated NAFTA. Because that was a complete disaster for the U.S. And since it's been renegotiated, things as far as the business world and manufacturing world, it has helped bring back manufacturing jobs to the U.S. Made it easier for companies to say,
sucking
now we can
is
stay.
Not so loud.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a Ross Perot quote. All right, that's fantastic the way you itemized that down from that article. Why don't you do the Trump's bottom 10, and I'll make my comments as usual.
Okay, on the 10, some of these are going to sound a little childish, but the first one was, he made a derogatory comment about blank hole countries, and probably used an expletive he may have thought twice he didn't want to use, but
he used the F word. Okay.
No, that was the S word. That was when he said.
It was the F word.
No, it was when he said,
Okay.
But regardless, the press took offense to it. That was that one. His as he has it here, number 9, his offensive tweets continue to undermine his presidency. You and I talked about this kind of off the air.
Let's go back to 10 and 9 here.
Okay.
Okay. You and I, or anybody in this planet, will make comments about the reality of things. However, you put on a face because you want to try and work through it professionally, so on and so forth. But you make a comment and it's picked up. Everybody's thinking the same darn thing.
Yeah.
It's just because somebody said it, you're going to put it on him. That's what I call chicken S. Okay.
Yep.
Chicken S. You can't say it yourself. Somebody else says it, and you go, "Ooh, that was dirty." Well, shut up.
Yeah, and when you're in politics, you learn. You may think this, but you're going to say this, and you just don't say it. Just don't say it. Sometimes it's easier just not to say it, and he's going to say it.
It's weak-minded people who get offended by stuff like that.
He's going to say it. Number 8 was this one I don't agree with at all. He said it's a misuse of power when he revoked the security clearance of former CIA Director John Brennan and then Jim Acosta's White House press pass. Well,
I totally agree, except for his last comment. Go ahead.
John Brennan, the left loves him. He's an idiot. When I had a TS clearance, a top secret clearance when I was in the military, we got what we called the early bird, which gave us all the articles that were in the popular press, and then gave us the classified versions of it. And John Brennan missed the mark. He was White House security director for a while. He missed the mark every time, not just once or twice, but every time. He had no idea what was really going on in the Spratly Islands. And if you don't know where the Spratlys are, Google them. The Chinese have taken and dredged up small reefs and made them into islands where you could land a 747 on it for the purpose of claiming the Spratlys, which is an oil-rich area between Vietnam, China, the Philippines, and that area.
And that expands your international borders out, the waters.
Exactly.
But at the bottom, what he's saying here in this article is basically that was bad because now they have a platform to go on.
Right. And I got to run through these. We're running. He drove away suburban voters. I think the mamby-pambies he might have driven away, but they will come back when we see who the Democrats nominate in 2 years. He didn't handle John McCain the best that he could have. I'll give him that one. I think he could have handled that a little better. His handling, a lot of people talk about his handling of Jamal Khashoggi's murder. He was the one that was murdered in the Saudi Arabian embassy in Turkey. I don't think we know enough about that to say he handled it wrong. And I think he's taking the approach of the investigation is still on hand. Let's wait and see what happens. And even then, is it our place as a country to do anything about that?
I think a lot of it goes back to what we just said before about how, you and I in a private conversation can say, hey, look, that was bad, but we still got to maintain relationships because if you look at it and put it on the scale, we just can't disconnect with this country. I mean, that's the country that opposes or is opposite of the people we're fighting against. So we got to maintain a relationship with them somehow. Yeah, it was bad, but figure it out in a confidential manner.
His news conference with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, we already talked about that. That was kind of not handled very well. Now, those are all what they call later on style things, that there was no real policy to that. The last 3 are kind of policy issues. His policy, now they say in the article, his policy to separate migrant children from their families at the southern border wasn't his policy. That was an Obama policy that was put into effect 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I think he was so busy with everything else that they didn't really notice that because it had been such a long, ongoing policy that no one really took the time to say, hey, we might have some problems here.
I concur with you.
Until that came up. Number 2, his planned withdrawal of U.S. forces from Afghanistan. And then number 1 is his planned pullout from Syria.
Now, look, Afghanistan, I think, is a freaking meat grinder, okay?
Yeah.
I think we shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Well, the English wasted 12 years there. The Russians wasted 8 years there. And we've been there since 2001.
Let me take that back. I meant to say Iraq, we shouldn't have been there in the first place. Afghanistan,
I agree with that.
I understand the initial concept of it. I get that. But
one of the things... 17
years or 18, whatever long it's been now, Mark and I, and we had a discussion about this, about why can't this country, this greatest country in the world, get the job done? It's all tribal. There's just no way you're going to do it.
You can't. When they went into Iraq, I took a lot of flack at the time because I didn't agree with it. We'd just have a series of body bags and we'd destabilize the entire region. And that's exactly what happened. We didn't like Saddam Hussein, but at the time he really wasn't bothering anybody but his own people. Let them handle it. When we went in there, how many young men died over there in Iraq for a situation now that's completely unstable, and there's just no control. And it's scarier now than it was 16 years ago when we went in.
You probably will agree with what I'm about to say. If not, make your comment. When you put on a uniform and you die to protect your country, it's honorable. I don't want somebody putting on a uniform to go in there to serve their country and they get chewed up in a meat grinder for political gain, sordid gain, money, or whatever. And it looks and it appears that these ongoing wars is just that. So when Trump says he wants to pull them out, I truly believe it's because it's like, what are we doing? What's the mission? What's the end result? We're just in there. It's as though the military-industrial complex, like Eisenhower said, it's a big thing. We've never had it before. It can be extremely dangerous if you don't put a leash on it. And it seems as though the leash is off, the muzzle is off, and everybody's making a bunch of money. And if you pull out of combat zones, you're going to lose. These defense contractors are going to lose a lot of money, and they have a lot of say and sway when it comes to making policy, because they can say, hey, listen, Senator, here, we'll take care of this, we'll do that, just vote this way. It's very, very easy to have that happen.
And there's a lot of money that feeds through those PACs to those politicians via those sort of companies, and the longer they get to stay in those countries, the more money can go to those PACs and go to those politicians.
And Eisenhower also said we need an informed citizenry to make sure that it doesn't get dangerous like it has and is at this point. People are reading bullet points. They're listening to
they look at their
taglines.
Facebook feeds, their Twitter feeds, they look at their Snapchats, and that's how they make their political decisions.
And if they do see a headline, they don't study the headline as to where it comes from, because I just read a headline, and I can't remember what it was. I just remember my reaction to it. There was a comment made, and they only put the headline of the first part of the comment, not the second part, because the second part will totally make you think different from reading the first part. But they want to sell papers, they want to sell advertising, they want to sell all this kind of stuff. So if you want to know the truth, you got to study. You got to look at different media outlets. You got to become aware of your surroundings. You got to know what's going on. You got to pay attention. You got to wake up. Okay?
You got to educate yourself.
There you go. All right. Bill, we're about to finish up here. You got anything you want to promote? Promote your show, man.
Yeah, listen up at 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday mornings to Bleacher Bum Radio, and myself and Coach Kenny Driscoll will be covering all the Cameron Yeoman basketball games for the rest of the season. You can tune in Tuesday night at 6 o'clock, and we'll have the tip-off for the Lady Yeoman basketball game.
Fantastic. Everybody, it's been a pleasure. Until next week, keep your powder dry, and God bless. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Very good.